See, alcohol is no respecter of intellect. Alcohol does not care if you graduated from law school or if you dropped out from high school. Alcohol does not care if you're black or if you're white. Alcohol doesn't care if you're a man or if you're a woman. Alcohol doesn't care if you're short or if you're tall. Alcohol is an equal opportunity ass kicker. If you suffer from the disease that I suffer from, that is first of all physical in nature, that there is something that happens in Ronald that doesn't happen in the normal person who drinks alcohol. There is a feeling that is created, a craving that takes place in my body that makes it more paramount, more important to me to get the next one than anything else in my life. I don't think you heard me. I will do whatever it takes to get another one. I was stealing my mother's shoes out her closet to get. I was stealing food out her refrigerator to cook plates for people around the neighborhood to get the next one. I stole a gold watch that she had. These things that I'm sharing with you right now may not have much import for you personally if you don't know the relationship I had with my mother, to know what the craving really does to me. My mother raised me and my 5 brothers by herself from the time that I was 9 years old, because she kicked that drunk of a father I had out of the house because he was dragging our family down, and she thought she could do better with herself alone with these 6 boys than with him. And so she took on the task of raising 6 boys by herself on welfare. And she wasn't satisfied with that because she wanted more for her and her boys. So she put herself back through school to get a high school diploma at night, while she worked during the daytime cooking and cleaning for other people's families, catching a bus at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning up in the hills to wash, clean, cook for other people's family so she could feed her family. And we never went hungry. She went to Trade Technical College at night to get a high school diploma, and she got that diploma, but she wasn't satisfied with that because she felt in order for her to really do more for her family, she needed more. So she went to college, Cal State LA, to get a degree. Well, first she went to Trade Tech again to get an AA degree for the first 2 years of college. And then she went to Cal State LA to finish up her diploma. Now she's working 2 jobs, raising 6 boys, never letting us go hungry, getting a diploma. She got that diploma, put 3 of us into college. Me, my brother Ralph, my brother Reggie, all going to universities as a result of the labor she put in. PTA president, all of those things. She got a job for Prudential Insurance Company after she got out of college. And they loved her so much, they didn't even wait for her to retire to give her a gold watch. I stole that watch. You can probably hear from my voice the love and pride I have for my mother, for the sacrifices she made for me and my brother. Let me have a drink. Alcohol does not respect love. It does not respect trust. There is no honor when you drink if you be an alcoholic like me, because you see, the craving overcomes anything if you be a drunk like me. But that's not the worst part of my disease, because you see, the answer is simply don't have the first one, Ronald. But there is something about my thinking, about my brain, that is different than other people. In the chapter called More About Alcoholism, chapter 3 in our book, they should call it More About Relapse, because it's the chapter that describes the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking. Once I've decided that I don't want to do it anymore, and I find that I don't have the power to stop myself, because my head whispers to me this lie: this time it'll be different. Don't always say it like that. Sometimes it simply says, Ronald, if you just put your money in money orders and mail it back to yourself, you'll be safe. Or it tells me if you just give your money to your mother to hold for you, you'll be all right. Or it simply tells me if you just put your drinking money in your front pocket and put the rest in the magic vault, your back pocket, or most dangerously, it just doesn't tell me anything. And I cannot recall with sufficient force the memory and the suffering of just a week or a day ago. The promises that I make to myself, trying to protect me from me. And until I can address the third part of my illness, which is that dis-ease of my spirit. In the book it's called a malady, a spiritual illness, a soul sickness. That hole that I've always tried to fill, that alcohol once filled, and because of the obsession, my head tells me it'll do it again, Ronald, like it used to. And it doesn't want me to see that the same thing that is kicking my ass is telling me I'm having fun. On July the 13th of 1986, a guy gave me some bags of marijuana, some bags of weed to sell for him. It was a Sunday. His name was Kenny, and he lived several doors down from my mother. And Kenny was slipping because by now they know who I am. They know what a drunk I've become, how scandalous I've become. And so they watch me now whenever they let me do anything. So he sits me on his porch. I'm a grown man, and he sits me on his porch like a little child, telling me to run out to these cars and sell this weed for him down the street from my mother's house. And as I'm doing this, he decides he wants to go have a hamburger. He thinks it'll be safe to leave me for several minutes. Big mistake. Soon as he turned that corner, I left and I spent all his money and I got loaded. And when I was coming back around the corner, I was trying to think to myself, what am I going to tell him? Because he's a dangerous guy and I've spent his money. And I see my mother get dropped off from church. She's dressed in these beautiful church clothes, and I have this bright idea. I say to myself, well, this guy respects my mother. He won't do anything to me in front of my mother. So I take this wolf in my mother's house to try to explain to him I don't have his money. And I'm in there in the living room telling Kenny, man, I'm sorry I don't have your money, man, but I'll get it. And my mother's in the kitchen cooking Sunday dinner. And Kenny just says to me, Ronnie, fine, man, it's cool. Why don't we just step outside on the porch and we'll make credit arrangements to get the money back? And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I got over it one more time, right? Because I've done this over and over and over again. And so Kenny steps outside and I start to step outside, looking back, making sure my mother is close enough to see us. She can't hear what we're talking about, but I can see her, so I feel safe. And Kenny's outside, and I start to walk outside, and Kenny must have been waiting on me because he must have leaned back and hit me with everything in his power. And I find myself flying over my mother's front yard. And I land on the grass and I roll over, and he didn't stop there. He proceeded to run over and started to kick me in the head and stomp me, trying to kill me. And as Kenny is kicking me and stomping me, I see my mother walk out onto the porch. And I expect her to say, stop, stop, that's my baby. But she says nothing. And I look back over at Kenny, and he's still kicking me and stomping me. And I feel as if I'm removed from my body watching this happen. And as he's still kicking me and stomping me, I look back over at my mother, and she turns around and walks back in the house and closes the door. And it was at that moment that I experienced step one. Some of our more cynical members of Alcoholics Anonymous tell me that I was probably just suffering from a concussion. But I like to think that that was a spiritual experience for me. I would like to tell you that from that moment on, I did not drink anything, but as soon as Kenny was finished, took a break from kicking me and stomping me, I jumped up and I talked stuff to him, and he did like that to me, and I ran. And I ran around the corner to another friend's house, and I tried to get high, and I couldn't. And I drank a cheap bottle of liquor, and I wish I remember what that was, because that became my last drink. And I drank something, and I felt nothing. And I started just walking. And I had this bright idea: if I go into a supermarket and shoplift something, somebody will arrest me, and I'll at least go to jail, and I'll have someplace I could just lay down and rest. Because I know I can't go back to my mother's house. That's the last place that I could go. And I was such a coward, I couldn't even go in the store and shoplift. And I walked further down the street, and there was a recovery center called The Wagon. And I had heard about The Wagon from a recovery place I'd been to in 1985, and I'll share a little bit about that in a little bit. But I went to The Wagon, and they told me they weren't accepting intakes that day on a Sunday, but if I called the next day, they would refer me somewhere. And I didn't have anywhere to go, and I just kept walking. And I finally thought to go over to one of my aunt's houses. And my oldest brother was staying there with her, my oldest brother, Willie. And the next morning, Willie sat down with me, and we started calling some recovery facilities. And one was the Harbor Light Center. And they told me that they had some beds, and that I should come there for an interview. And that's when I went to the Harbor Light Center that Monday morning on July the 14th of 1986, in the state I described to you at the beginning of this meeting, more dead than alive. And they gave me a bed. And I did nothing but eat and sleep for the next 7 days while they detoxed me. When those 7 days were up, they started bringing me to in-house meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, where I started sitting in the front seats and listening like only a dying person could hear. There were men and women sharing from podiums just like this one, that I would come, and then I would come to, and then I would come to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Step 2 in the program of recovery, the spiritual solution to my spiritual problem. I need to let you know that when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous and you guys told me that God was the solution, I felt lost. Because I need to let you know that I was raised by that mother who was so spiritual, so religious, the Southern Baptist woman who never let a Sunday go by without taking her boys to church. And I was raised in church, Tabernacle of Faith Missionary Baptist Church. And I used to go to junior church, and me and my brothers with our little bald heads, we called them covadises, right? You know, and we were always the little white boys. And we knew all the scriptures, and we were always the best little kids in Sunday school. And we were raised in church. And I need to let you know that somewhere in my journey through church, I separated from God because of my thinking. It's funny when you sit in church and when you lust. And you sit in church and you have these thoughts that you have. And I came up hearing something about you as sick as you're thinking. And I thought that God, if God could see the way that I thought, he wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. And I'm also an intellectual. I told you about how I did all that reading and stuff. And I used to do all this reading, and I want to be this. Well, if there's a God, how come there's famine? How come there's this? How come there's that? And my intellect started separating me from